Okay, looks like everybody's here. I think we're ready. We'll start Grand Traverse County's Resource Management and Administration Committee meeting on August the 11th with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. May we have a roll call, please, Linda?
Commissioner Wheelock?
Yes, ma'am.
Fleece?
Present.
Baxbauer?
Yes.
Thomas?
Here.
Richardson?
Here.
Stepka?
Here.
Friend? Here. Inman?
Yes.
Chairman Hooper?
Here. And now for the approval of minutes of July 14th.
Move for approval as presented.
Support.
We have a motion of approval and support. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Okay, at this point, we have time for public comment. Anyone who wishes to address the board, please come forward. State your name. Seeing none, we have approval of agenda, please.
Mr. Chairman, I would ask the board if they would be willing to entertain adding one item to the agenda. Human Resource Department is requesting a deletion of a staffing position at the MSU Extension, and this would be amendment to the staffing plan. It was a grant that's no longer available. And I'd ask the board if they'd be willing to add that to the agenda under Human Resources.
A motion to approve the agenda with the change noted.
And, okay, we'll put that under B3. Okay, do we have support? Okay, we have a motion and support. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Okay, now we have a special order of business. Any? And now the consent calendar, please, Linda.
The purpose of the consent calendar is to expedite business by grouping non-controversial items together to be dealt with by one commission motion without discussion. Any member of the commission, staff, or the public may ask that any item on the consent calendar be removed therefrom and placed elsewhere on the agenda for full discussion. Such requests will be automatically respected. If any item is not removed from the consent calendar, the action noted, receive and file, or approval is approved by a single committee action adopting the consent calendar. A, receive and file. 1, 4-H in motion, June, July newsletter. 2, Grand Traverse Conservation District staff report, July 2010. 3, housing liaison report and project listing. 4, 86 District Court annual report enclosed. 5, first half of 2010 workers' compensation report. 6, Grand Traverse County Road Commission monthly report. B, approval, United Way Day of Caring. 2, remonumentation contracts for 2010. 3, HUD Community Challenge Planning and Rotary Charities Program grant applications.
Okay, would anybody in the public like to remove something from the consent calendar? Anyone from the board?
You're on a roll.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, I
Motion to approve
would
the consent calendar.
support.
Motion by Friend, support by Stepka. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Fleece?
Yes.
Baxbauer?
Yes.
Thomas?
Yep.
Richardson?
Yes.
Stepka?
Yes.
Friend?
Yes.
Inman?
Yes.
Wheelock?
Yes, ma'am.
Chairman Hooper?
Yes. Okay, now we're on department action items. A, resource recovery annual report.
Morning, Bob.
Good morning. I provided the annual report a few weeks ago to you, and I know there were some questions on the report, and I'd like to answer those questions this morning if I can, or get you the answers that you need.
Did you introduce yourself?
Pardon me?
Did you introduce yourself for the
Oh,
TV?
Bob Oakstrom, Resource Recovery Department
Thank
Manager.
you.
I'm sorry. The report was actually built on from 2008 report. I don't believe the reports have been done in the past, so every year I've been trying to build on the report, and this report, I think, contains a little more information than the last report, more historical data, comparing prior years on recycling and some of the department activities that we do. So it's kind of a report that's evolving as I move forward, and I'm willing to take any suggestions from the commissioners on what type of report you'd like to see, if this is the format you'd like to see it in, or if there's other ideas here.
Dennis?
Well, I just, having kind of overseen this department for the year or so when we didn't have a director, I just want to thank Bob for this report. It's really thorough. You're doing a really good job with preparing the statistics. It's, I personally, I think the format's great. I'm still bewildered, as I think you are, of how our waste volumes could be dropping. I understand that the economy's down a little bit and we're not building as much and that kind of thing, but this has been a trend for years of waste volumes dropping with recycling volumes staying pretty stagnant. And it's just amazing in a county that's been growing, how that could take place. And, I don't know if we're not going to talk about it today, I guess, in detail, but you're in the process of now doing an RFP to bring an auditing firm in or someone in to go to the actual designated facilities and audit the facilities to make sure that they're complying with our
Correct, yeah.
ordinance.
RFQ went out last week, and
That'll be
should
good.
be in at the end of the month, to see what it would cost to do an audit of the first and second quarter of this year. Again, the volumes are dropping. Through the second quarter, we're down about 4,000 tons this year, so try to get somebody in and take a look at best practices. How do they collect and track and report the solid waste numbers at the disposal facilities, and how does that compare to the surcharge that's being paid, and just get an idea. And I'll also ask them to take a look at volumes, see if they could give some insight on why volumes are just dropping every year. Obviously, as Zena said, it's part of the economy, but still, I want to make sure the reporting is correct and that we're getting everything that the counties do.
The other thing I wanted to point out was how successful our household hazardous waste programs still are. I think 44,000 pounds of household hazardous waste we collected last year, and the net cost was less than $1 a pound. And I understand, too, that you bid that out this year, Bob?
Yeah, we bid it out this year, so we've, so far this year, we've seen probably a $3,000 to $4,000 cost savings off of last year, and still handling the same amount of quantity that we handled last year. So we should come in well under budget on the HHW program this year with the cost savings.
Good.
I think we should note, number one, the household hazardous waste program is entirely paid through a grant, so there's no general fund or surcharge money.
Well, just
paying
the
that.
pesticide side of it, just the
Okay, I'm
clean
sorry.
sweep,
So this is one of those
$30,000.
programs, in fact, that we want to
Right.
make sure we maintain because it's so popular.
Bob, I had two questions. One, in regard to the commercial recycling, have we been able to identify any way to handle or identify the back hauls of the cardboard?
That's something I've been trying to work on, to see if we can get some type of reporting system in place so that they could just automatically report to us what they're backhauling. It's a bit, I think it's a large amount that we usually estimate it, but I think it's a large recycling volume we're not capturing. So we're trying to find out what companies are doing all the backhauling, especially for the different stores in town. We also don't capture scrap metal that is being recycled through Rifkin's and that. So, I think we're under reporting, obviously, how much recycling we're actually doing. So that's one of my goals, is to work with the business community, the commercial community, and see if I can start picking up some of those numbers. I've contacted Walmart and Sam's Club and trying to get recycling numbers, just trying to see if I can get recycling numbers from some of the big stores.
I guess what I'm trying to point out is that the commercial and industrial community in our area are doing a much better job of recycling than we're reporting in this report.
Oh, I would agree with that.
Because,
Correct.
Myers, Spartan, Walmart,
Yeah.
they backhaul cardboard out of here with every truck that comes north.
And the numbers reflect whatever the licensed haulers are picking up for recycling.
Right.
So, they're backhauling.
They're backhauling it, so that doesn't report at all.
Yeah, we're missing those numbers.
And then the other thing, in the regards to the battery collections, you're estimating a cost in here of, what was it, $4,000 for this year?
That's just disposal cost.
Yeah, $4,000.
Yep.
That is strictly the disposal cost, it's no labor cost of the time
Correct.
that we're spending you are spending, not we, you are spending picking up and packaging individual batteries for recycling.
That's correct. That's numbers probably double once you include in the labor that we have to provide to manage the program. About a year ago, they changed the DOT requirements where you actually have to separate all the batteries out and actually have to bag the lithium and the rechargeable batteries. So,
Individual.
if you're looking at 9,000 pounds, you can just imagine how much time that takes to get all that separated. I do use community service workers when available who will come down and help me do sorting. I had one gentleman down and actually sorted for 2 days. Probably sorted 6 55-gallon drums of batteries. So, I'm trying to get some help as far as that goes in doing some of the sorting. We still package the batteries, and of course we have to prepare the material for shipment, so there's a little time there as well. So we do have, probably of all the programs, this is the one where we, expend quite a bit of labor in picking it up and getting them processed into the recycling market.
Okay, Larry?
Dennis? Yes. I have a question for you. Well, not a question, but we typically have had, in the fall, our meeting with all the township representatives and the city representatives each year. Sometimes we have them in the spring, sometimes we have them in the fall, sometimes we have two.
Yeah.
And in my meetings with Acme Township, Whitewater, and Union last night, they felt it would be probably appropriate if we would consider scheduling something this fall. And because of the current situation we're at with the solid waste plans, Acme Peninsula and the city are preparing a bid.
East Bay as well, I believe.
East Bay as well. Some of the southern townships are still trying to figure out what they can do and what they can't do. I'm just wondering if, and I know I've asked Bob to visit with some of those folks as a follow-up, but I'm just wondering if it would be appropriate to try to schedule something maybe in October or something,
Well,
given the interlocal agreement's going to expire in December.
We typically do something, well, when we've done it in November, but sure, we could schedule something in the October timeframe. Excuse me, that's probably a good time because we should have most of these bids back, I would think, by then, right, Bob? For the ones that are in the process of doing it?
I would think so. I think the bids are going to be a little longer. I think they're giving them quite a bit of time to do them. So.
My suggestion would be that whenever we do it once the bids have been received, so that everyone can see the results of those, along with the results of Blair's and Garfield's that they did. But also, I want you to know that starting this month, or next month, Bob is going to be going to each of the townships and each town board meeting. Is that this month or next month, Bob?
I'll probably start next month.
September. Talking to them about the interlocal agreement, what the options are. The Board of Public Works has directed him to prepare an amendment which gives the townships and city more flexibility in terms of contracting and staying under the interlocal agreement. We met yesterday and Scott Howard has that prepared. He'll be rolling that out to all the townships in the city when he goes out to them in the next month, so they'll all have those amendments to consider as well. So the idea here is that if we continue with the interlocal agreement, there's been an amendment that's been changed, it's a 10-year amendment that gives the townships more flexibility. For example, had Blair passed their millage based on their bid for waste collection, they would have been able to do that under the intergovernmental agreement with the Board of Public Works. So Bob will be taking that out to each local unit of government and discussing options with them at that time. Also, Bob and I talked yesterday, you were probably going to talk about this, Bob, but we've told you we're going to put together a transition plan for moving out of, that the Resource Recovery Council has, and the board has said we're not going to have the drop-offs any longer, and Bob has, I think, a pretty good and creative plan that he's working on to transition out of this over the next 6 to 8 months. We went over the first draft of that yesterday, and he'll be probably providing that within we said in September we're going to bring it back to the board. So we're working on a transition plan, which he will be sharing with all the local units of government as well. So I think we should do that in probably the October timeframe, but I'd like to base it around when these bids are due back.
That seems fair. Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Ross?
Good.
Bob, you're showing a small increase
year to year on residential recycling, curbside recycling. Is that based on more people having access to curbside or just more people participating?
I think it could be a little bit of both. I don't think the curbside district's expanded over that period of time, but I think, I mean, we've tried to do a lot more advertising in the curbside district, trying to get more of the cart users who are already paying for recycling to go ahead and get a bin and recycle. I mean, we still have quite a few people in the curbside that still use the drop-off stations, even though they have a cart that's available.
Yeah.
We get calls quite a bit about people asking, do I live in the curbside recycling district? And we sent out some information in the last Board of Public Works bill about the curbside recycling district, and that stimulated a few calls as well. So, yeah, we've seen a gradual increase in curbside recycling from the residential side as well.
So anyone who's paying for curbside pickup has recycling included?
If you have a cart.
If you have a cart.
If you use the budget bag, you have to subscribe. You have to call your hauler and say, I'd like to have curbside recycling, and then they will provide that at a cost. So
Yeah.
that's a little screwy, but that's how it currently works.
Any ideas on how to increase? I mean, obviously, we're going to have to increase curbside recycling when the drop-offs go away, so.
That'll be the thing that'll make them do it.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, with drop-off stations out in the community, out in the especially southern part of the county, I guess it eliminates some of the incentive to go to curbside, as long as the containers are there. I've been working with American Waste with their new transfer station material recycling facility, which is pretty well centralized in the county. And I've been talking with Mark Belveheimer, looking at setting up a centralized recycling center at that facility, which would be available to all county residents to use on a no-cost basis. The facility will be a state-of-the-art facility. It's a huge facility, and I think it's a really good location to set up one of those type of recycling centers where anybody can use that facility to recycle. They can take their recycles there anytime they want to. So, that's part of the transition plan. Also, the southern communities in the county can expand their curbside recycling program. They can join the designated curbside recycling district and get recycling at the curb, just like we do in the city and Green Lake and Long Lake and that. So, there's that option to join the designated curbside recycling district and get the recycling at the curbside. And then I know some may want to continue to use their drop-off stations, and I'm sure that some are looking at funding and what it would cost to maintain the drop-off stations they currently have in their communities. So those are.
What are the reasons that some of the townships haven't declared the entire township a curbside recycling?
I believe with the drop-off stations out there, it's we've got a place to recycle. It's not really costing us, per se, to recycle in the drop-off stations. So I think, like I said, I think it's a little bit of a disincentive to expand curbside into some of those areas with the drop-off station already there.
It wouldn't cost them anymore. I mean, I checked some of the prices around the county, whether it was in the curbside or outside of the curbside district, and the rate was the same for households, whether or not you had curbside recycling or not. And I checked with like three different companies. So it doesn't necessarily increase the price.
Not necessarily. I mean, the way it works, if they join the designated curbside recycling district and you have cart service, then you would start paying for recycling. If they wanted to charge you more for recycling, you would be paying for recycling if you haven't currently used it. But I'm not sure that it would necessarily increase the cost. I mean, it's, the haulers would, some of them, I think, would provide curbside recycling anyway.
I talked with the Green Lake supervisor, the Long Lake supervisor, and the Peninsula supervisor, and they didn't notice any increase in cost to their residents when they went curbside recycling.
So
which-
some of the haulers may already have a buffer cost already built into their current rates, so.
Kind of makes you think that the townships that haven't declared curbside recycling are actually limiting the availability of it to their residents when it wouldn't cost them anymore.
In some senses, I believe that's true. And I know I was at Whitewater last night, giving an update on the solid waste system, on the bids that are been going out and that, and they didn't really, they're not in favor of the curbside recycling district. For whatever reason, they like their drop-off station, and, I understand that. And I think Whitewater may decide to keep their drop-off station and fund it themselves. I don't know, but it's all it takes for the township to join the designated curbside district is just send a letter to the Board of Public Works or to me and ask to, whatever area they want to expand to make that area curbside recycling district. So it wouldn't take a lot of, it wouldn't take any change to any of the ordinances or anything to do that. I mean, it's a voluntary, it's a voluntary option for them.
Okay, Sonny?
I guess someone mentioned earlier the intergovernmental agreement. First, I want to remind you that the intergovernmental agreement is between the townships and the villages and the Board of Public Works, not with this body. There was an extensive discussion at Resource Recovery last week about the intergovernmental agreement. Remember, if you will, that this document automatically renews itself if the townships take no action. They have to opt out of it to make any action. The Board of Public Works has no opportunity to opt out of it, and that's one of my concerns with the amendment. The amendment is a 10-year binding agreement, and it's solely binding on the Board of Public Works because the townships still have the opportunity to opt in, opt out. The Board of Public Works has no ability to get in or out.
No, I think that's been changed in the...
No, it's not. I read the amendment.
Yeah, it
Cover
locks
to cover.
both parties in for 10 years.
Yeah, both parties are in.
Well, but the townships have the ability to go out and contract separately, which they didn't have before.
Yeah.
They
No,
do
that's
have the
true.
option of going out and...
At the end,
So they can do with whatever they want on their own.
at the end of 10 years, there is no renewal.
Correct.
Both
Right.
parties can either sign a new
But
agreement or both parties.
The
can opt out.
obvious question becomes what happens if everyone doesn't sign the amendment, or if part of the townships opt in, so part of the townships opt out, where does that leave the Board of Public Works with operating the system? Because the current intergovernmental agreement that's in place requires that the Board of Public Works operates the system if one township wants it. So it's not a great document, and, we've had a lot of discussion over the years about that, and I'm really disappointed that the amendment that we're presenting does not give the Board of Public Works an option to close that agreement. It still does not give the Board of Public Works any ability to close that agreement.
I think that's true.
Chris?
Bob, really, this is an excellent report. Thank you very much for it. I'm going to ask you to look into your crystal ball. What impact do you believe that the American Waste Transfer Station, the new one, will have on revenue at the landfill? Do you believe that it will significantly increase the amount of recycling in the county?
I think with their new system in place, they'll be able to divert quite a bit more materials out of the waste stream, especially with capability for single stream processing. So yeah, I don't know if there'll be a significant impact, compared to how the landfill volumes are gradually going down, but it will be an impact. They provide about 30% of the landfill surcharge. Waste Management provides probably 55%. So if they divert more material out of the waste stream, obviously, whatever goes to landfill is going to go down, so we're going to see a decrease in what's going to the landfill, so a decrease in surcharge as well. And I'm not sure what that number will be. They're talking about an 80 to 85% diversion rate at the new facility. They're probably doing, at their current facility, especially in Kalkaska, they're probably doing 55 to 60% diversion rate there. So I would expect to see recycling go up, and landfill goes down, which is a good thing. But then on the
Then the revenue
funding
goes down,
part
yeah.
of it, that has an impact on how much money we can collect to fund the department. So.
Bob, do you anticipate that the residential portion of recycling in that will change, though? I think this new system is going to pull more commercial and industrial recycling than it is residential. I'm inclined to believe the residential recycling rate's still going to remain similar.
Probably the rates that's reported, I'm not sure how they're going to report that, because when it comes in into the waste stream itself, then they pull it out. And, a lot of it they pick up in one truck. So, they pick up, could pick up some commercial and residential together. So probably most of it I think most of the diversion will come through the residential, whatever's not being recycled now. And if they go to single stream, they'll be able to pull out, quite a bit of that recycled material out of that side. In commercial and industrial as well, but I think the commercial side does a little bit better in separating out their recyclables at the curb. Personally, I think if you looked at the numbers, they are pretty solid on what they're pulling out.
Thank you very much. I believe that's what I've been saying for a long time.
Beth?
Oh, you mentioned the community service workers you use for household batteries, as in jail inmates?
What's that?
Community service workers are they jail inmates?
No, they're serving,
Oh, okay.
they're.
I didn't know if that was a nice way
No,
of saying.
No, the community services are serving community service time for whatever.
Just volunteers.
Yeah.
Volunteers.
Well,
Okay.
they're not-
Well, I don't have
I don't want
any.
to confuse volunteers with jail
they
inmates.
are
They are
Certainly don't
assigned,
wanna do that.
They are court-directed community service people. They have
Oh,
to.
okay, so
Yeah.
still. Oh,
Actually,
well, that's
they
good.
do a good job. They're a little more conscious in sorting than that, and they've helped me quite a bit if I can. It's just a first come, first served basis. So if I can get somebody,
Good.
I try to get somebody every week or two to come give me a hand.
Chris?
Bob,
Oh, I wasn't done, but okay.
I'm sorry. I thought you were.
I just wanted to echo what Dennis and Chris said. I think all of us feel the same way. Nice job on this, and you mentioned improving it every year. Have you been here that long? Have you, how long?
Couple.
A year?
How long have you been here?
Doesn't seem very long.
Year and a half.
Just over.
Oh, okay. Great.
I was just going to mention, Bob, that some of the schools in the county require their high school students to do community service work, and you might try that.
And and I've actually started to look into that, and we've used some in some of our events and that, so, that could be a possibility as well. It's a real tedious job. I mean, I hate sorting them, to be quite honestly, because you got your little batteries, you got to pull out the lithium from anyway, I try to find somebody that doesn't mind sit
And-
there and do the tedious work of going through all
One other
them,
thing, this
so.
is a wonderful opportunity for you to plug your kids' garage sale.
Oh, yeah. End of this month, we're having a kids' garage sale at the Civic Center. And I think we've got a little over 20 signed up so far, so we hope to get 25 or 30 participants in the garage sale at the Civic Center. The response has been real well. The kids can come in, set up their goods, and sell them to the public, and they learn a little bit about business, and they get an opportunity to put some of their goods in the reuse market. So yeah, I think it's going to be a fun event, and we've been trying to do a lot of advertising for the event to get people out there to actually come in and buy some of the goods that the kids have. So we look
And
forward to
that's
it.
August 21st, and I happen to know that because it's my birthday.
Well,
Any
you
other
can go there and
questions
buy a
for Bob?
birthday
I
present.
will. I will.
Okay, well, thank you very much for your report, Bob.
Thanks, Bob.
Thank you, guys.
Like 39.
And now we can move on to Human Resources. Recommendations for moving forward.
Good morning, Jen.
Morning, Jen Seaman, Human Resources, and I'm here today to, for a few things actually, but the first item is recommendation for moving forward following the Siegel Ad Hoc Committee report. And it encloses my memo to Dennis, so I will just share the highlights, and if you guys have any questions, please let me know. Would like to move forward with most of the recommendation that the ad hoc committee recommended, which would be to review the job descriptions that we have here at Grand Traverse County, use our current point factor system, which I believe is up to date and very useful for reviewing our job descriptions, go through each department, alphabetical order, if you feel is the easiest way possible, and review all those jobs that need to be reviewed, and then use external, the benchmarks that the ad hoc committee recommended. They did recommend using managers and executives with Midwest comparables. That's one area that I don't necessarily agree with. I think that we could use managers and executives, and looking at myself with the state of Michigan comparables. I don't think that the Midwest is necessarily relevant for all of the managers and executive positions, and to use a benchmark, we could use the state of Michigan comparables, and if a position comes open where we needed to look Midwest, we could do so at that time, but I think to benchmark it, the state of Michigan would be a relevant market, not the entire Midwest. And so that would be consistent with the other public safety positions, which was also through the state of Michigan comparables. Let's see, am I forgetting anything? I don't think so. It's in the
Last
memo.
paragraph on
What other
66,
questions?
yeah.
Do you guys have some questions for me? I've been meeting with a lot of department heads as part of my introductory process here at Grand Traverse County. I met with a lot of the department heads, and Siegel was brought up 9 times out of 10, maybe more than that, 9.5 times out of 10. How can we move forward? I really want to move forward. I want to provide some, look at these jobs. They haven't been looked at in a while, and really feel as though this is something we can do using our current point factor system, using human resources in a time where, I know the budget is of a huge concern. I believe that we could do this within human resources, and we have the job descriptions and can meet with the department heads and update them from there going forward. Part of this, one part that I did forget was the HR department, reviewing those. I would like to use someone externally. Actually, one of the members of the ad hoc committee, Kay Soratelli, has offered to provide her services to, and if you don't remember her background, she was at Dow for over 30 years in compensation and benefits. I'd like someone externally to review the jobs in human resources, just so there's no concern of favoritism or anything of that nature. Minimal jobs in human resources, really there's 4 job descriptions, including my own. So that would, she estimated, would take probably about 6 to 8 hours, not a lot of time. So I would like to do that, but I think human resources could take care of all the other job descriptions.
Initially, I was concerned about the amount of work that this would take on the human resources staff this fall, but Jen assured me that she thought that was a more appropriate way to handle it, since the ad hoc committee determined that our point factor system was appropriate and that the job descriptions were generally good. So it's more a matter of reviewing all those and then re-point factoring them all under the current system. So with that, I'm all right with doing this. The one change that I did agree with her on is looking at people outside the state of Michigan. I don't think we have to do that. And really what we're suggesting here is courts would be compared with courts, which judges have always conveyed to me is the most appropriate way to do it. We would compare local markets for other positions other than public safety, which would be state of Michigan, and then professional management people, which would be state of Michigan. And we're talking about using the same, developing a market that would be similar to the old market we had. We would look at taxable value, and we would look at population and use a combination of those two. So it would be the counties that would be closest in size and ability to pay to us. And I agree with Jen on that. I think that makes most sense.
Any other questions? Larry?
Curious, on the positions that you would review statewide, again, getting back to the ad hoc committee's discussion about the discounting factor for other areas that would have higher costs of living and higher costs of housing and those kinds of things. And apparently they did not like the discounting formula that they use. So how do we deal with, if you're going to do a comparison of positions within the state of Michigan, do you just narrow it down to counties that are same size? Or are you going to go to larger counties and try to discount them?
No. The first comment, we like, as Dennis said, we'd use taxable value and population size, so that way it would take out any of those concerns of the discount factor.
So what we did last time is we designed two charts, comparable charts. We looked at taxable value, and we tried to find the 10 counties, 5 above us, 5 below us, the immediate 5 above and immediate 5 below that had a taxable value closest to ours, put us in the middle. Do the same thing with population, and then look for common municipalities. And we might expand that out. We might go to 12 or 14, and then look for maybe 8 that are common in the two charts, and then try to get us in the middle of that and define that as a market. But that would be something we would bring back to you. But I guess the first step in this is looking at the job descriptions and having their staff point factor them to see if they've been point factored correctly in our system, which the ad hoc committee said was a good system. And then once that's done, then instead of going out and checking 60-some positions, is that what we did, Jen? Or did we do 120-some? You know, checking them for external equity, we would do more of the traditional benchmarking, pick real common jobs, and that's what we would benchmark against in these different markets.
Okay, Larry?
Follow-up question. So how would you vision the final product looking like? Would you extract what you feel is valid out of the Siegel study and put it into a new report, or would you just amend the Siegel report to indicate that you have a different methodology that you used, which would give us a different set of data? And then at that point in time, you could go back really to the Siegel report and to your new market study and see how close you were, if they were really skewed or were they close. I mean, the argument was the methodology. It may have not been the results. I mean, so so how would you approach that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think after I think the amend would probably be the appropriate word, and at the end, if we looked at them and we could see really where things came in at with benchmarking them against what does Siegel have, I don't see that as coming into factor in the decision-making process, but more or less after the fact, how close were we? One of the recommendations from Siegel was to put everyone in the county into one large pay scale, and that really looking at that a little bit further, did we do some forcing there? Did we force anybody into certain levels? We have all these different labor contracts, all these different labor groups that have really negotiated their wage scales over time. Some might be a little bit different to the pennies, but that's how they've been negotiated over time. And did it really make sense to bring everyone together under one pay scale? And I think that might have been easier to administer in HR, but for our employees, you know, they've got the different wage scales within those contracts, and I see those as still being valid, and those pay scales have been there and have been bargained with over time. So, leaving those.
Tony?
Jen, I guess the one comment that I would have is, you know, I appreciate your efforts to go back and evaluate all of these jobs and assign them point scales and validate the point scales. My only concern would be, let's not put dollar amounts per points until we have all of the county done.
No, that's not.
The point factor system is already in place.
Well,
There's
but-
already,
But we have, Class Is have a pay scale between here and here. I don't want to put that dollar amount to those until we've completed the county as a whole.
okay.
Because we have the classification, our point system comes down to, whatever their points are, and they qualify in a payroll I, for example. Okay, we have a dollar amount that says that person will make between 49,000 and 53, I don't remember what the numbers are. But I don't want to assign that dollar amount until we've completed the county as a whole. Because my concern is if you don't get all of it done, and you start raising up departments as you go through, and you've changed the value of that scale, then you've got people doing the same job in different departments getting paid different monies that will actually end up scoring, the same way. So even though I want to validate all of the point scales, I don't want to put a dollar amount to those valuations until such time as we've completed the county,
Well,
the whole
Jen,
county.
Wasn't,
Does that make sense?
isn't that what we were going to do, kind of? We were going to go through the whole thing and then bring it back to the county board with a goal of having this done by January 1st.
Right.
I
And-
don't want to, that wouldn't be fair if we started juggling around with any dollar values for those points until we had all of the county
Well,
done.
and I think eventually, if you adopt this concept, and then this is a little risky, but if you adopt the concept, I would still expect that we would bring back the result to you before actually the implementation of it takes place. Now, having said that, I think we should have a little discussion about, how do I, we committed to the Siegel study, and then we didn't implement it. And I don't think I have to talk to you about what the impact of that was. Okay, so here we have a concept to go through a different way and do it. And I will tell you right up front that if we adopt this and go through it, and it has been the largest issue facing our employees, I would want to, as I said with the Siegel study, I would want to go in this with the idea that we're going to implement it when it's completed. I don't think this is the kind of thing that you can, again, say, well, yeah, go do the study, but if we don't like how much it costs, we're not going to do it. I don't know how else to say that. If that would just be twice doing the same thing to the board. I think evidently this meets much more closely the desire of the board, of this board, in terms of what you're looking for. It meets what the professionals have said, and the professionals have seen this proposal, and they're okay with this. But I guess I would caution, don't adopt the concept and tell us to go do it if you're not buying into implementing it when you're done.
I had that question, and actually I tried to call one of the Siegel ad hoc committee members last night and didn't get a hold of them, but this has been forwarded on to them?
Yep.
Okay.
They knew about the meeting
Jen's talked to them
today
about
and everything, so they're probably listening.
Chris? That's real important. You see, I hope you see my point.
Yes.
We don't want to give the employees, again, the understanding that we're doing this to implement and then pull it back at the last minute.
Hey, Chris?
Jen, you mentioned comparing courts with courts. And in most instances, you're exactly right, because a court recorder is a court recorder, and you don't really find a court recorder anywhere else other than in the courts. But my question is, what about other positions where you do find those positions in the private sector, such as a legal secretary? We have a few lawyers in Traverse City, and they have legal secretaries. So just because a legal secretary works for the government, the public, how are you going to address that?
I think that would be part of the process of meeting with the department heads. Where could this employee be, where could you lose this employee to? And if this job was open, where would you look to recruit somebody from? If it was from a private sector law firm and they said, sure, that would be appropriate, we could look into that, and that, to me, that would be a case by case, a special situation. But I think for the most part, looking at the courts will probably give us the majority of the equity that we're looking for. I think there might be a few situations where we could look at special things like that, those specific jobs that might be universal, but court reporter, maybe not, but a
No.
legal assistant or an office specialist or an office clerk, that, yeah, absolutely. Where would we lose somebody to, and where would we be recruiting from?
And that was really one of my biggest objections to the Siegel study, is, there are secretaries in the private sector, and I didn't see any private sector jobs compared with the county positions. So I just thought I'd bring that up.
Sure.
Larry?
Dennis, if you can refresh my memory here, previously the board did or did not adopt a structure for the Siegel study that they would implement over up to a 3-year period?
No, that was never
Or is that
formally
just up for discussion and we just never took action?
That was what was proposed, but never adopted. And, I understand the unknown here.
Yeah.
We have no idea what this might cost to implement. It might be very little or it might be a lot. And I understand that I can't ask the board to commit to a number. You can't. I understand the difficulty of this, but, you can see it from the employee standpoint too, and from their side in terms of, we've always promoted fairness and equity, and to go into another study and kind of amend that study and then not have it adopted, I guess it would have to have serious implications for you not to adopt it in terms of my advice to you to go forward, because that would be very detrimental to the morale of the employees. And, if you ask me, I would tell you, my philosophy is, pay fairly and have less people if you have to have less people, if that's what it requires. I mean, pay people to have quality people here who can do an excellent job, and have less of them if necessary.
Just a quick follow-up. My feeling was that with regard to the Siegel study and the results is that I guess we were poised to go up to 3 years at some point in time, and that, if the study, I believe the study showed the majority of positions somewhat close, and there were a number of positions that were really skewed, that it would provide the flexibility of the board to make those adjustments if we could make those adjustments in 1 year for the positions that are fairly close, and the ones that were skewed over a 3-year period. I mean, it seemed to me that philosophy was at that time seemed reasonable, but then we had the results of the survey when we did that, I believe. So,
Just thinking this out loud, perhaps an approach for the board might be this: that we approve the concept, we direct staff to go ahead with it, but we reserve the right to implement it depending on our financial condition and our ability to do so, and that'll all be reviewed before, and there's no commitment to implementation of it. It's a test and a check on the validity of what we've done so far. I think you have to make that statement, because
Back to what I said earlier, you set, after the evaluations and the points are set, then you set the dollar amounts for each of those point values.
yeah, but you don't have the ability to go in and figure out what the points are and then determine the equity and then say, well, we can't afford that, so drop all the grade pays down so that
You just employ less.
Yeah, that's what I suggest. If you do it the other way, Sonny, then what you've done is you say we're gonna put equity into the system, but then if you don't have enough money, you're saying, yeah, well, that's what you should be paid. We're gonna pay you $1.50 an hour less because that's all we can afford, and we got to give this guy $1.50 more. You can't be in that situation, I don't think, and yet you cannot say we're gonna implement this because you don't know what it's going to cost. That would not be responsible. So I think we have to do this in a way where we very cautiously say we're going to reevaluate, we're going to evaluate this new review of it in terms of our present point factor system, and then we're going to see financially if we can afford to do it or not. And I think, and it's going to be all or none. That's the other thing. We're not going to pick and choose pieces of it. It's going to be all or none, because if the system's good for one, the system's good for all. But I think it has to be clear to the employees, no guarantees right up front, because I don't think you can guarantee.
Larry?
You know, the premise that any study, including the Siegel, is going to be a positive, a pay increase. And you know, everything that I've listened to this morning from everyone, the assumption is everybody's pay is going to go up. Well, I don't agree with that. And I think we need to look at the market in the private sector, because I spent a lot of years in the public sector, and we were always at the margin, if you will, or maybe slightly below. And since I've been out of it in a mere 13 years, to be frank with you, I've been appalled at some of the wages we pay. And if you look in Grand Traverse County, some of the best paid positions are municipal or educational. And I think we have to be very careful. I don't see anything wrong with the concept, but I certainly see something wrong with the assumption that we proceed saying it's going to be positive. Maybe it ought to be negative. Maybe when we get all done, everybody has to take a $2 an hour pay cut. You know, Chris brings up a very good point. A secretary is a secretary is a secretary. When it comes to the courts, we don't have much control over there. The judges do. And the judges are going to have a definite say in what their employees are paid. But a lot of the jobs in the public sector, there's, and I think Sonny could tell you, there's an equal job in the private sector. And I think we have to look at that carefully.
Well, that's really the reason this new labor market has been brought forth to you, because this labor market that's being proposed basically takes a great number of the employees and compares them locally to the private sector. That's what it does. You know, they're going to be used with Traverse City area comparables. The ones that they're recommending are public safety, managers, where they can't be, and court positions. Everything else compared locally. That's kind of what's being suggested here. So, and you're right, I don't think we shouldn't assume, if that was the assumption, that everything's going to go up as a result of this. This is the third study I've done, and in every case, some positions go down. And the last one I did in New York, almost half the positions I would say half the positions stayed the same, a quarter went down and a quarter went up. So, you know, we should not assume that that's the case. And I think it'll be real interesting to see what the local market provides.
You know, as a commissioner, probably the comment I hear the most, or the banging on the head I get, is over wages and fringe benefits of public employees. Like, in fact, I had an older gentleman tell me not too long ago, well, you know, there was the day when the public employee was the public servant. He says, but now I don't know if we can afford them servants anymore. And he had a pretty valid point in some areas, I think. Another thing I think has really driven this factor is the unionization. Not saying that unions are bad, not bashing unions, but if we look today at where our auto companies are and where the Japanese auto companies will be in short order, when you take unionization and a person that does nothing in their job versus the one that works their butt off, and the pay is equal, that doesn't happen in the private sector. The private sector, as a rule of thumb, in the smaller companies, pay is for performance. And I think, Jen, we need to really look, even in the union jobs, at pay for performance. The old adage, you can't do that because it's not fair. Well, I think it is fair, and we need to come up with a system where we can judge what the performance is and pay appropriately. I agree with Dennis. I'd rather have one good employee than two mediocre employees any day. So,
Chris?
Budgeting out for outcomes will take care of that, Commissioner Fleece, because it really does factor performance in. I have a question for Dennis. Dennis, you mentioned that the negative impact of Siegel, and this may be a question more for Jen. Have we had massive resignations as a result of not implementing Siegel?
No, no. I think you're making an assumption that massive resignations is the only negative impact of the study, and it's clearly not. Employee morale is a huge impact of the study, and that has been definitely negative. Departmental ability, department managers' ability to manage employees under that situation where employees are disgruntled as a result has been negative as a result of the Siegel study. So there have been a lot of other outcomes, and I think Jen explained that to you earlier. As she went around and met with every department, it's the #1 issue on people's minds. And so there are other negative aspects between people. So yes, I guess if you're satisfied with a workforce that isn't leaving but is disgruntled, then you should be satisfied.
Well, I didn't say that, Dennis. I just asked. No, I just asked the question.
No, there haven't been massive layoffs. There are massive leavings.
No, I understand morale is certainly affected, but I was just curious about the resignations.
No, there haven't been.
Okay, Beth?
And I would just say it isn't an all or nothing. I do hear the morale and some of the comments from employees, and I hear that every bit as much as I hear, concerns regarding budgets and so forth. But anyway, any price tag that, for lack of a better term, that this would cost the county, I mean, it's not like we're just going to go and expand the budget to accommodate it. We can't do that.
No.
What we have to do is implement what we can within the parameters of staying fiscally sound and responsible. And sometimes that may mean that in light of the budget cuts that departments are facing, there might be even, you're talking about limiting the number of positions then, if in fact there is a general cost to implementing this. And, I would refrain from calling this a study just because I wouldn't say it's necessarily a study. I think it's an analysis by our HR department and bringing the jobs, analyzing, make sure they're comparable and the wages are up to date. Exactly. The concern I have from the discussion today is that, when you go to look at public safety or court positions, later is exactly what was mentioned, and that's, we want to be, your memo outlines that will be compared with Michigan comparables, so I want everybody in my department compared with a Michigan comparable. Do we need to break that out any further? Do you know what I'm saying?
Well,
Like department by department?
I think what first thing Jen's going to have to do is sit down with some of these agencies and see if I think the assumption will be local comparables if possible. That's the first primary,
Whether
local
it's private or
comparables.
public sector comparables?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, local comparables if possible. That's what we would focus on, because the board has said local is where we should try to compare. But like, for example, back to the discussion with the judges for years, circuit judges have suggested to me that we should be comparing to other comparable circuits. Okay, now that information through all the years has never been available to us. Okay, I mean, has never been given to us to make those comparisons. But I think the judges will be happy with that recommendation to compare with other circuits, for example. Now, whether or not they'll be happy with having their staff that is that has local comparable jobs to be compared locally, I don't know. I have my doubts, but I hope they will. And so, we'll have to look at that. So Jen's going to have to go meet with them and kind of define and probably bring back to you a better idea of how these comparisons will take place. Because, for example, in that case, I don't know, I could see a judge making the argument, well, I don't want half my staff being compared locally and half my staff being compared at other places in the state in other circuit courts. because the disparity in salaries might be considerably different. But I just don't know that, and we'll have to have those discussions in those particular cases.
Because my guess is this commission will find it acceptable that, you know, some of the staff that has backgrounds and expertise that's really only marketable to other court systems, that we find that acceptable that they're compared with that. And I don't think this commission's going to find acceptable that some of the positions where they would be lured away by other jobs just locally, that those be compared by that.
I understand that, and we'll convey that to them.
Okay, Sonny?
I guess, the one thing that always bothers me when we get into this discussion is when we talk about the Siegel study, we automatically talk about it like it was all a bad thing, and that it is totally invalid. Because what we've seen in Siegel is that 70% of our people were paid basically within the range that they were supposed to be. There was a small percentage that was overpaid, and the number that were underpaid was a very small number, but they were very significantly underpaid. So the cost of the implementation of Siegel was huge. So, and I'm not sure that this study's going to, whatever you want to call it, is going to show a whole lot different. We're going to still have those specific jobs that Siegel identified that we were significantly underpaid are going to come out of this program showing that they are significantly underpaid. And, I'm going to be amazed if that's not the situation. But every time we talk about anything that has to do with the Siegel study that was done, the impression that this board has and the community has is that study was invalid and it was just a horrible thing. But that study showed us that at least 70% of our people were paid in the ranges they were supposed to be. And I have no problem moving forward with this concept, but I think I'm almost willing to bet you when it's all over and done with, we're going to have those same positions that were identified in Siegel as significantly underpaid are going to come out of this showing that they're significantly underpaid.
I don't necessarily disagree with you in that. I think we need to have that, the employees need to have some closure, or they need to be able to move on. They need to be able to to have that final answer, yes, your job is paid appropriately. That closure has never been there for them. And so that's what I'm getting back to and saying, well, I might be graded appropriately, I might not be. We need to have some closure to that so we can move forward and provide employees with the reason and the rationale as to why they are or are not paid inappropriately. And I don't necessarily agree with that. And I don't want to give the assumption either that all the jobs are going to increase. I don't see that happening. I do see a lot of positions that are paid appropriately for the area. I don't, or for the county, I should say, I don't want to give the impression that everyone's going to get an increase out of this. There probably will be less of that than people think. So I don't mean to give that impression whatsoever. I just think something needs to be done so that way we can say, yes, our job descriptions are up to date, we are paying appropriately for the area, we can effectively recruit, and we can effectively, retain our employees as well.
Mr. Chairman, I would move that we direct the HR staff to complete an evaluation of the job descriptions and the point values to all Grand Traverse County positions.
Support.
I'm
Motion
sorry, the
support by
motion should have come
Stepka.
before the
Any further
discussion.
discussion?
As indicated in the recommendation.
As in the
Per recommendation, yes.
Okay.
You with you, Mike? Okay.
And this is a long ways from implementation.
Certainly is. Any further discussion?
Yeah, I guess I would just like to note in that motion that not all departments would fall within this local comparables would be used. I mean, if some of
Well,
those...
and it's outlined in there that some of them are within the state, some of them are within
I
the
think what we're
courts.
going to end up doing is, once we talk with the departments, Jen, we can provide the commission with a list of how we're going to do the comparables.
Okay, that's fine.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, and we did put in the memo, January 1 target date.
That's going to be tough.
I guess I'd like to use that loosely, considering everything that's going on. How about we just continue to provide updates as we go through the process? And, that would be a goal. I just would like to see some closure, but I want to make sure that it's done appropriately and that we have, that there's quality. I want to take quality over the speed of the process as well.
Jen, do you think you could provide us a short memo that gives us an update maybe every other month?
Yeah.
Is that
absolutely.
reasonable?
Absolutely.
The motion is to move forward, so it doesn't give you a date.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same?
You're
Thank
in the
you.
debate.
Let's move on
Okay,
to sewer and water
That is
technician
to say
job.
that you're still
Okay,
in the
this should be hopefully a lot quicker. This is just information only. We're looking, I've met with both George and Ross on their positions, and they were sewer and water technician 1, 2, and 3, looking to update it to sewer and water operator, the operator instead of the technician. It's the more up-to-date terminology for those roles, and so that's what we're doing. There's nothing else changing. The grading isn't changing. The level 3 sewer and water technician will now be lead sewer and water operator.
Mr. Chairman, I would move to approve the retitling of the DPW positions as outlined by the HR director.
That's the motion.
Okay, I have a motion to support by Fleece. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same? Carries.
Issue plan.
And now we have B3, whichever that was, I forget what it was.
The MSU extension staffing
Yes.
plan. The grant funding for it was called program assistant, will end this Friday. So that employee will be, this is just to delete one program assistant from the MSU extension staffing plan, effective this Friday, August 15th.
Mr. Chairman, I would move to eliminate one full-time employee program assistant from the MSU staffing plan, effective August 15th, 2010.
Support.
Okay, motion by Wheelock, support by Thomas. Chris?
Has the employee been notified?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same? Thank you. I think we're through, Jen. Appreciate it. Okay, administration, 2011 budget summary.
Can I take some introductory comments for that, Mr. Chairman?
Larry?
As you know, Dick and I have met with Dean Bott and Katie several times over the last several months to do some background checking and some detailed reviews of the structured Board of Commissioners budget, of which you have attached in your agenda. So what we did is we took the 2010 allocation and we did the 7th month estimate through July, and then we did a 2011 estimate with periodic reductions in some categories, and we also attached the overall, just for reference, 2011 budget for the Board of Commissioners and for all the other departments. So our goal was to attempt to get to $38,229 in terms of reductions. The remarks you see on page 78 indicate that there are a number of items in the Board of Commissioners budget. One is that Chris Kramer's compensation is in our budget, as well as some general operating expenses in terms of costs for supplies and printing and postage, advertising, those kinds of things. And so just to highlight some of the comments, one is that I kind of felt that the Board of Commissioners was ahead of the curve a little bit when it made decisions throughout the years from 2001 till now not to raise the salary or the per diem for the Board of Commissioners where other boards and commissions have done so, as well as approving.
Did your healthcare costs stay stagnant during that period of time?
You haven't had it, excuse me, I haven't had a chance to explain it, but I know where you're coming from. So, and that, you know, we've gotten cost of living raises for, you know, the rest of the staff members. And as you know, the board took action on, prior to the filing deadline to make sure we had public notice and the candidates were well advised as to the compensation package for the 011-012. We felt it was important to do that for public disclosure, and we did so. By doing that, the way that we went back and recalculated the differential of the 10% copay and for the reduction of the family and the spouse coverage which we estimated at $13,992 in reduction. We also looked at our activity level over the last several years for per diem, and we reduced that down to 6,000 to be pretty close to where we're at. The other reductions has been in the line item of travel, conferences, and conventions. What we tried to do is to have limited presence both at MAC and NACO to bring back that information to the county. And there was only one membership that we've, at this point, have recommended not to move forward with, and that's the $500 membership to the Convention and Visitors Bureau, since we've had really no activity with them over a number of years. And there's a couple items in the county's budget. One is accounting, auditing expenses, of which that is cost allocated, and is on the credit side, which you don't see on your sheet, but it's the net number that you're looking at. It includes the credit. And attorney fees that we spend in terms of these things, these closed sessions and these kinds of disputes and those kinds of things, has been in our budget, has not been cost allocated to the departments that generally cause these types of areas for us to deal with. We've not allocated those dollars to them. And we really don't have in the Commissioner's budget any contingency available for 011 and 012, excuse me, for 011. But our thought was that as we go through the year, as we do with the rest of the budget and Ways and Means on a monthly basis, because we all know the budget is just a best guess estimate, and then at Ways and Means, one of the primary purposes of Ways and Means is to review the budget on the monthly basis and make changes in either the revenue or expense side as we move forward through the year. So we felt that overall we had met the the requested reductions in the County Board of Commissioners budget for 011, and that if there's going to be continued deterioration in the budget in 012, we can revisit some further reductions. And with regard to the compensation for commissioners, also if there's further reductions, we could take a look at, although most of the compensation is fixed for 011, 012, there are some areas that we can continue to take a look at in our budget for reductions in 012 if necessary. But I think we've met the overall spirit of the reduction. This was, I guess, meant for information at this point in time. I know that all the departments have submitted their budget for our discussion and dialogue for the dates that we have set for September 8th, 9th, and 10th that you've all gotten notice on. So I thought it was, Dick and I wanted to get back with everyone and just kind of present what we thought would be the presentation of our budget at this point in time. So.
Okay, Beth?
Can I get would it be possible, nice presentation, but would it be possible to get the 09 budget and the 09 actual?
I think we can do that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, all right, okay.
Sorry.
I guess the only comment that I would make, we have to remember these numbers probably aren't fixed in stone because we're going to have at least 3 new commissioners sitting here in January. And I can't tell you whether those commissioners are or aren't going to take the health insurance. And
I believe I got that covered.
okay,
Yeah.
and then I believe the payment in lieu of insurance was approved to go from the 1,000 to 2,000 as we offered to other county
Right.
employees. And I don't know that that's reflected here when you make a $2,000 reduction in that amount. You know, not to say that everyone's going to take it, you know, we may opt out and not take it anyway, but
Yeah.
that would be the only comments that I would have is
Okay.
because we're going to have some new personnel here, those numbers may change, and some of those people may find it more necessary to attend, you know, different classes and things to come up. So we may see in the first year, we may see an increase in some of that travel budget and classes and things that people want to attend to get up to speed. And I don't, I appreciate your efforts and it is very good, and I think it's a realistic number, but those are variables that I don't think those of us sitting in this room can identify at this time.
Yeah, we had a discussion about the payment in lieu, and I know the current resolution in place is that you could go up to 2,000. I know a number of commissioners have elected not to go up to the 2, and they've taken the 1,000 or 750, but I guess we could probably have some level of discussion about that.
And just, it is still a living document, it's a budget,
Yeah.
we may have to amend it somewhere along the way.
Yeah.
But those are variables that I'm not sure we
Chris?
can identify.
Perhaps, Commissioner Inman, you might want to talk with
Get with Jason and
and
Rob.
and Rob and Bernie,
Okay.
and just get their
Okay. I'll do that.
their perspective. It might help you as you finalize
Okay.
your numbers.
All right, okay, I'll do that. Good
Did you already
suggestion.
determine whether there was healthcare, whether they would be utilizing
I-
healthcare?
I will have to go back and check, but I believe the original discussion I had with both of them is that they had employer-paid health insurance, and they would be not taking it through the county. So I'll double verify that.
I think it's.
Rob said that?
Yeah, I'll double verify
Because
that.
at the, there
I'll double
was,
verify that.
at a panel discussion, he indicated that he would be taking it.
All right, okay, let me
So
get back
that's
with
why I
Rob.
suggest just,
Let me get back.
You know,
to
what I was going to say was, there are 35 departments in the county, and as you can imagine, what you're dealing with here is no different than every other department. As employees leave and new employees come in, we always have to have a margin to kind of address those changes. So I wouldn't, spend a lot of time on that now. I mean, budgets are amended all the time as a result of it, as a result of changing personnel. So, I don't think it's important that you go through those steps unless you feel it absolutely is necessary.
I was just kind of curious who was taking healthcare.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
that's simple.
Yeah.
Well, that's a different issue.
I didn't want to
I'm
speak.
talking a technical issue.
Speak for him. I
but the-
mean,
Yeah, I'll
I
double
may
check
be
with you.
wrong.
This
I'll be
this
double-
is,
double
this
check
is
food.
perfect, this is perfect for the budget purpose. I just want you to realize
Okay.
that these numbers probably aren't cast in stone.
No, they can't be.
Because there will be variables.
Okay, then let's move on to the administrator's report.
Okay. Let's see. Well, we talked about the first item I had. I wanted to point out that with resource recovery, there will be a transition plan that comes to you next month. And, the plan is the drop-offs will go away starting in January or thereabouts. I wanted you to be aware of that. They also approved a budget that'll go to the Board of Public Works next week, 2 weeks, that takes the surcharge down from $7.50 a ton to $4.50 a ton, I believe. And that came on a split vote by the Resource Recovery Council, I think 4-3. So there are a lot of things going on there. Of course, you all are aware, too, that Blair Township voters turned down the proposal to do waste collection. Commissioner, I think Fleece told us about some of the issues that were going on there, and even though that price went almost in half. But I think one of the things that Bob feels that it pointed out was there, besides some of the other problems, is there are a lot of people out there who don't have waste collection. And, we were told that years ago, and I think 6 years ago, and we all said, how can that be? But I think there are a lot more people out there that don't have waste collection than what we know. And I think that probably impacted it, because for those people, certainly, if they're not paying for it now, and they're taking it to work or whatever, and then they're going to be giving a charge to it, they're going to pay for something they're not paying for now. So anyway, there are a lot of things changing in there and a lot of issues in resource recovery that are going to come to the forefront. Remember, the surcharge expires at the end of this year. I think Bob's transition plan is 1 year of the surcharge at $4.50 a ton, and then move to some other funding mechanism, or at least that's what he's proposing to his board. So you'll be dealing with that issue.
Let's see if everybody's rates go down when the surcharge goes down.
Right. We will have the budget to you by next Wednesday. I just want to give you a brief update on that. We have most all of the budgets in, not all of the budgets in at this point in time. And there, it's not perfect. I just got to tell you, it's not perfect. We gave everybody targets. Many people met the targets, a few did not meet the targets. Some met the reduction target, but when we told them, here's your total budget, this is the budget you have to come to, which includes collective bargaining raises and things, they didn't meet those targets. So Dean and I are $900,000 that we're still trying to figure out, and we'll have it done for you. But we'll have the budgets, we'll hand them to you next Wednesday morning, and then you'll have at least 2 or 3 weeks to look them over before we have the department hearings. And I think the intention is still, in that first meeting, would just be with commissioners to get an update on a presentation from us, brief on what that budget looks like, and then hopefully time for you to sit down together and talk about what's the resources that you're going to allocate to next year, and have that discussion. I think that was the intent of the first meeting. Is that right, Commissioners? And kind of hammer on that, and then bring the departments in for meetings the next 2 days. So we're working on that. We still have a little ways to go. You're not going to see much of a capital budget. You are going to see an analysis of the capital improvement fund that'll show that there will be some money there, but it won't be a great deal of money. You will see, I'm guessing, I'm not going to tell you how many people will have to be laid off as a result of this. Some of it would be handled through attrition. Some of it will require layoffs. You will see a number of additional recommendations that we end up making to bring the budget in line, which in other words, additional layoffs in departments that either did not provide reductions. You're going to see Dean and I have to go in and make reductions in a number of departments to make those budgets balanced. And then we're changing it up this year so that each department will do a narrative for you. That'll be the top page in each section, and it'll kind of lay out the implications of the cuts and what cuts they made, if any, to meet the budget request.
Dick, you have a comment? Sorry.
Before you get too far along.
Yep.
The feds yesterday, in all their wisdom, passed, what was it, $26 billion bill to spruce up teacher, police, and fire salaries so they won't get laid off.
Health, too.
I think we better find out, as soon as, what's his name signs this, even though I'm fully opposed to taking
You already signed it.
printed dollars, but we better find out so that we can save some of our sheriff's departments.
Well,
See how we can get aboard
I talked with
that.
Nate yesterday afternoon about that, and Nate is looking at that, and you can bet when they come in, they'll have that information for you. Also, for example, I don't know if you heard, but there's $300 million coming to Michigan for health services. They're going to be plowed back into health departments. The problem is there were health services. The problem is there were $600 million in cuts. They were hoping for $600 million from the federal government. They're getting half of that. So, when I talked to Fred yesterday afternoon about it, it's like, you know Fred, he always wants you to know exactly what it is that's happening, but rarely do we know, And so, you're going to see his budget, and, that thing could change 20-30% over the course of the next, 6 months, so. But, yeah, we're watching all those things, Commissioner. Did somebody else have a comment on budget? Okay. So we're working on that. We'll have it to you by next Wednesday, as we promised, and then the real work will start. Collective bargaining, the captains did approve the tentative agreement, so you'll be seeing us come back to you at the end of the month on that. I believe Teamsters General is voting later this month on the proposals that we were negotiating with them. And then, Jen, we have 6 more or 7 more that don't have wage and benefits set for next year that we're going to have to get on and work on those. But Jen's doing a great job with that, and we hope to have those all in place. One of the things Jen and I have talked about is as soon as we get this budget out to you next week, which, we'll have proposed some, I said I wasn't going to do this, but I'll say it like this, somewhere between 20 and 40 position eliminations, layoffs. Jen and I are going to ask for a meeting with our union reps, the Teamsters reps, the AFSCME reps, the POAM reps, Circuit Court Association reps, and their stewards to have a meeting to lay out the budget proposal to them and show them the implications of the cuts that will be made and how it will impact their unions, and reiterate to them our willingness to discuss other options that they may feel they have that are creative and that might help address this shortfall. We think that's important to do. I want to make it very clear. This is not in any way a collective bargaining ploy or anything else. You've said budget the balance on revenues, and that's what we're doing. But we want to engage them and give them an opportunity to make their suggestions known. And the reason I say that is because as we've met with a couple of departments, employees have said to us, what about if we want to offer up other suggestions? And we know that from a collective bargaining standpoint, that has to be done through the unions. So we're going to meet with the union representatives and kind of lay this all out to them and have that discussion with them. I think that could be fruitful, and we're hoping to get some good suggestions from them. Next thing is Mr. Peterson is still working and taking out his equipment at the dams. It's actually going pretty well. What's left now is at Sabin Dam. The runner is left, and he's working on that. He had it sandblasted this week so that he could start removing it. It sounds simple, but it's epoxied in to the base of the dam, and so it has to be carefully removed, and you have to remove it in a way that you don't deteriorate the dam itself. So that is left, the runners, which direct the water, in Sabin. They're out in Boardman. And the only other equipment he has left are the 2 trash rakes. And there he's waiting for an agreement with Board of Light and Power, because they're going to help him remove those, and that requires a 2-week notice to Board of Light and Power so they can schedule crews. I also wanted to point out that we dropped the water level at Sabin by almost 2 feet. That was a result of taking boards out at Sabin Dam so that water could freely flow over the Tainter spillway. And what this will do for us is it will allow debris to pass over the regular spillway as opposed to having to go through the dam, which will eliminate debris in the dam and will eliminate the need for a trash rack there. We've talked with the DEQ or MDNRE. Some citizens have noticed this and have raised questions about us doing it. We have a letter from Jim Pulowski saying, yes, we can drop that. We've established a new lake level or a new pond level at, I think, 611. Noticed the MDNRE and Board of Light and Power, because they still monitor that on the SCADA system, of what the new level looks like. So just if you hear about that, you're aware of the fact that we did that. Lastly, I want to report that last Friday morning we had a power outage at the jail. It also affected the court buildings, and we think it even affected this building. There was some damage caused at the jail. Our generator, which is 50-some years old, which you gave money to change out this year, went on within 6 seconds. So it worked fine, but we're not sure. Talked to some people who say it might have been an over, what'd you call it, Dick, when we talked about that?
Over-rev.
An over-rev of the motor that caused surges to go in. We burned up some control panels and hot water heaters. We burned up, I think, a computer or 2, a copy machine. So there was some damage as a result of this. And the communication system went out for a short period of time, which was really troublesome to us. We don't have an uninterrupted power source on the jail, and the reason for that, Danny tells me, is there are so much that is critical in terms of operations that it would have to be so large and so expensive that it's not practical to have. But we're still looking into this, because I don't think it's not acceptable that we'd have especially communications go out and things like that. So we are in the process of still evaluating why this occurred and getting a definitive answer, and started the project of replacing the generator, which you had budgeted. Something I didn't realize about that generator, I think we budgeted $125,000. This old generator was, I think, a military generator, and was actually built on site, and then the walls were built around it. So we actually, in order to do this, we have to go in and knock out block walls and disassemble it piece by piece to take it out in order to put the new one in. So we're starting on that process too. But my big concern here is how our generator could kick on in 6 seconds and cause damage. We are filing an incident report with MMRMA to see if we're covered for whatever loss we had. Most of it was staff time. And I want to thank our facility staff and jail staff. They were in there immediately, and by the end of the day, had almost everything up and running and working.
Dick?
You might check with them to see if there's something available that will keep that generator from engaging until it's operating. You know what I mean? Until it's
Until
running
it's
at
up
the
to
right
speed and everything.
Well,
Yeah, because
and most of the new systems are designed that way. The
Well, most of the
generators
new
do not
systems,
do
we're
not
talking about
output
something
until they get
designed.
up to certain RPMs, and the old stuff didn't work that way. You know,
No.
my air compressors are the same way. They have to build up RPMs of the motor before they start
Well,
generating
you know, the thing
air.
is, though, we run this once a month, and we test it once a month,
Well,
or once every 2 weeks.
Fails
This
once
thing
in a
is
while.
regularly pardon?
it fails once in a while.
Yeah, and that's, I think, what happened. This has never been a problem before, but it certainly was this time.
How long was the power out for?
Just, you know, honest, I can't say that. I don't know. I don't know how long it was out for. They told me, Commissioner, I'll have to get that for you, but I can't remember the amount of time. It wasn't a great deal of time.
Probably long enough for that thing to start.
No, when they set
No, it was
that
out
in
like
there-
45 minutes or so.
Oh.
I can't remember exactly.
When
how
they
long.
set that generator in there, they just took a crane
Yeah,
and why couldn't you just remove that roof and lift it
well,
up?
that may be,
Yeah.
but he says, I don't know what the problem with that is, but I'll ask Danny that. So that was a problem that we had. Also, we have kind of an emergency over there in terms of the walk-in cooler, which holds all our food, is going out. It's not holding temperature. They've been trying to mess with it for several weeks, finally determined we can't do anything with it, so it's a compressor failure. We're going to replace the compressor in that, and so we did that on an emergency basis. We have a week's worth of food in there at any one time. So we did not go through the regular bid process because of the emergency nature of it. We did call around quickly to get prices, and there's a company, local company, that's going to come in, and for I think $100 is going to provide us an outdoor cooler that will be, you know, have a compressor on it to put the food temporarily in while they change it out, and evidently they can change it in a day. It's going to be about $5,500 to change that compressor, and that'll occur sometime in the next week or two as soon as the new compressor comes in. So that was not a result of this power outage. That was just a completely separate thing. That's pretty much what I'll report at this time. Any questions for me? Yes.
I don't have a question, Dennis, but you might want to mention the Commission on Aging Union election.
The two supervisors in the Commission on Aging Union, I spoke with the chairman about this, have signed cards to unionize. There's only two of them. They both signed cards. We anticipate that they will join the union. They have joined the union. They will join the AFSCME union, which is our supervisory union. We have currently 9 members in there, Jen? 8 members? 7 or 8, and this would make it 10. So it's something Jen worked with them on, trying to, look at what options we had, but the two felt strongly they wanted to be a part of the union, so that's taken place.
Okay, we can move on to unfinished business now with the county license fee, license/fee on September.
This is on the agenda because at the board meeting, Commissioner asked if Bob could attend to answer some questions that you had about his opinion. So Bob is here for that.
And Ross, do you have a question?
I think Ross had a question.
Yeah, it's really just in the last paragraph. I mean, you make a very good argument on why we, can't, I mean, not that there's any general will on the board to do something like a licensing fee, but I raised the issue as a possible option. And you make a pretty good argument as to why, that's not possible as long as we have a Board of Public Works. But in the last paragraph, you say, the Board of Commissioners may direct or override decisions of the Board of Public Works. And I just wonder if you could, flesh that out a little.
Well, the statute establishing the Board of Public Works provides that the county board has general control over that board. And what that means is that the county board could at some point direct or override those decisions that the Public Works Board makes. What would be left out, I guess you could you could say, well, why can't we just make the decision ourselves if we have this ability to override any of their decisions? Well, what's left out there is all the procedure that is built into the Board of Public Works statute. There are some members of the Board of Public Works that are there as a result of statute, the Road Commission member and the Drain Commissioner, and their input and there are reasons, of course, why those people were built into the statute as members of that board. And so if you just leave out the Board of Public Works in making the decision, you leave out their opinions and their input in determining whether a special assessment district or some other type of financing makes sense. But at some point, they will have to make a decision about how to resolve this question, and at that point, it would be appropriate for this board to take it up as a matter on their agenda, whether, if they have a concern about the way that the Board of Public Works has determined that they're going to go about financing.
So, what if this board, and obviously this is totally hypothetical, what if this board said, officially, formally to the Board of Public Works, we think that you need to, do some sort of a special assessment to fund the septic plan?
Is that a motion?
No, it's not a motion. Absolutely not a motion. This is a hypothetical.
I think this board, as I indicated, can direct the Board of Public Works to take action on that issue, but then it has to go through all those proper procedural channels through the Board of Public Works.
Okay,
before it
but
comes
I guess
to
my question is, how much weight, were we to pass such a motion, how much weight does that have? I mean, could the Board of Public Works says, you know what, yeah, that's what you said, but we don't like the idea, so forget it.
They could say that, and then at that point, it could come back to this board, and the board could simply direct them to implement a special assessment district, for example. Let's say they go through their board and determine, no, we don't want to do the special assessment district, then it would be a decision that this board could make to direct them to implement a special assessment district. That's the best interpretation I have of these statutes.
But we can't establish a special assessment.
Not without going through Board of Public Works first. And it wouldn't be established by this board. It would be established through the Board of Public Works and the Board of Public Works Act.
Larry?
I believe that question was presented to John Axe, Dennis, and it was his feeling that the Board of Commissioners could not make that determination, and it was solely with the Board of Public Works, and that was an earlier decision that he
Actually,
had
John
presented.
Axe.
Is that right or no?
John Axe had the opinion that this board could override a decision of the Board of Public Works.
Including that decision?
Yeah.
Huh? I didn't know that.
Beth?
So the thing is we need a decision to override, right?
Yeah, I'd compare it to, a court where you have to go through an administrative agency, for example. You have to exhaust those administrative remedies before you have jurisdiction in a court to decide whether the administrative body did its job or not properly.
And even the decision not to implement something is a decision, right?
Of course.
I would say yes. I think that when I look at the phrase general control and how it's been interpreted and the ability to direct and override decisions, I think that has to be the conclusion.
Sonny?
I guess I'm on the other side of this fence, so what I want to know is, if the Board of Public Works passes a resolution that says that we're going to assess a special assessment district to every septic tank in the county, does this board have the ability to override that decision?
I believe it does.
So we can cancel
It
it.
works both ways. Cuts both ways.
Okay, any further discussion? Dennis?
Well, I'm going to ask a different scenario. The Board of Public Works says we're not going to put in a special assessment district. The county board reviews that and said, we're directing you to put in a special assessment district. The Board of Public Works says no. What happens?
I don't think they have the ability to do that. I think that the board exercising its general control can, again, direct that board to
And they would not
carry out
have a
the
choice.
special assessment district. And it would be done under that statute. It wouldn't be carried out by this board.
Okay, Chris?
Bob, does a decision by the Board of Public Works have to be in the form of a motion? Because oftentimes, just taking no action isn't, in my view, necessarily a decision.
You say that?
Does it have to be a motion?
Sure.
In other words, they say, I move to not impose a special assessment, and that passes. That, I understand, is a decision. But if they simply do just have a discussion with no motion,
Yeah, I guess
is
I
that
don't
a
want to
decision?
speculate about how that would all be carried out and guess about all the different scenarios that could happen. I think when the point is reached where it's felt that Public Works has been given an opportunity and they've carried out all of the proper procedures in making a determination, then I would look at those procedures and determine whether or not I feel that it's proper for this board to then take up the question.
So,
But there's so many different ways that the
so we
question could be
literally,
posed, I just don't-
literally could go through the minutes and take a look at their motions, and if there are any motions we disagree with, we can actually reverse those. Is that what I'm hearing, those decisions?
Depends on, again, looking at exactly what was done, looking at the record below, and the exact questions that were posed.
So one action that potentially could come from this county board would be to make a decision on whether or not you support a special assessment, whether you do or you don't, and then direct the Board of Public Works to go through through the appropriate procedures to consider that and consider your direction. Would that be correct?
Yes.
So, and that would get them through that formal, because it sounds like they have to go through this formal process in order to make a decision of some kind. So you could direct them to go through that, and you could direct them as to what your position on it is, and take care of that at the same time. And then if they don't do it, or don't agree and don't do what you suggest, then you'd have the ability to go back and direct it.
It's like a good way to...
Or change the composition of the board until we get the decision that we want.
You're mean. Okay, Beth?
I have a question for you. It's a little bit more general, but related to the same topic. The Board of Public Works, we've talked about the configuration of it, and each way I look at it, if you have, if we indeed placed more supervisors on that board, and then they had a majority, the rural townships are not going to be happy with that. They may say they're fine with it, other than the septic facility, but I just anticipate some decision years forward where they're not going to be happy with it. And I also think that the inverse is true as well. The supervisors of the 5 townships may say that they're fine with, not having a majority on there, but then as soon as the decision is made a couple years down the road where rural may push that decision, they're not going to be happy with it. I just think that they really should develop into an authority, the 5 townships. I don't see any movement being made in that direction, unless I'm missing something, if someone wants to let me know, but I don't see any direction. Is there any way from the County Board of Commissioners to push the configuration of an authority? And I guess what I mean by that is dissolving the BPW.
I guess I share the concern that you have about the composition of the Board of Public Works. In fact, there was a resolution this board passed a while back that would change the statute to allow, specifically to allow supervisors to serve on that board because there may be a question as to incompatibility of public offices. And so I see the benefits of an authority for that board for the very reasons that we see this contentious
Never-ending.
dispositions between rural and the members, the townships that are members of the BPW. And so that makes sense. You could dissolve the BPW. I guess that would be the way to force the issue.
Well, Bob,
But-
we would have to look at that. I don't know that we could dissolve the Board of
I just
Public
said there's
Works because of our contractual commitments.
There's some significant ramifications of doing that, and I'm not sure how all that would be resolved because of the contracts that are involved. And I don't know if you can just dissolve that body completely.
I think frankly, probably a more practical approach, if that's how the county board felt, would be to either just, pass motion and, saying we'd like it to be considered an authority and open up discussions with them. I think the other thing that has potential that we've kind of set aside is what Bob spoke about earlier, this whole question of compatibility, which I think is still a question out there, isn't it?
Well, it's attempted to be resolved through that resolution that was drafted by Scott Howard, because you can see the obvious conflict when you've got townships that are contracting with the county BPW and their supervisors also serving on that board. If that resolution is passed, I assume it's not a question at all, and but nevertheless, you can see the practical problems with having supervisors of the 5 BPW townships as members of a county-wide BPW, or a BPW that affects the entire county.
Right. And I understand we're kind of outside the latitude of the discussion. Could we possibly, how could we further discuss, passing a resolution, asking them to consider moving towards an authority? Where would we like to put that on a future agenda?
Yeah, I would think a future agenda, and it would probably be wise to invite them to that meeting as well and have some discussions on it, but you'd probably want to have the options out there to, lay out the option of what would have to, how that could be accomplished, or at least generally how that could be accomplished. And I think we've done that a number of times through John Ack, so I think we have that information.
Right, at Twin Lakes, that was kind of a little bit of a conversation, dysfunctional conversation.
Larry?
Probably, we're going to schedule something in October with the townships. Probably want to throw that on the agenda as well, and then just have kind of a consensus that, this is something that we want to take a look at in terms of the structure and how we might want to implement that. But, just talking with Wayne Clatter, for example, he thinks it's the way to go, is that, anybody in sewer and water, they would just all be members of the authority, and as townships increase into sewer and water, they would just modify or amend the authority and include them, and
Well, the difference...
and then we would just take over the solid waste piece through resource recovery, and I don't think we're going to get a fight out of it. It's just a matter of the time, the exercise, the legal costs, the documents, those kinds of
we've
things.
talked about this before. I don't think the majority of the townships agree with this idea of being an authority.
Oh,
It's
okay.
been brought up.
Well, let's throw it
I mean,
out.
I can remember bringing it
Are you talking
up.
about the 5 townships?
Yeah, I can remember bringing it up 8 years ago, when Dick was on Board of
Let's
Public
not worry
Works.
and wonder about this for another 3 months. Let's just next month put it on the agenda and ask the 5 township supervisors to come.
I know the townships are real receptive to county influence and rules.
Yeah.
Chris?
And Bob, back to our original discussion, if this board recommends to the BPW that they become an authority, and they decide against it, we can then override them, right?
Well, I don't think you can force them to do anything, the townships,
Yeah,
because they would be paying the bill.
Oh, we're crazy.
I think you'd have to at some point dissolve the BPW. If it was their desire to become an authority, then this board would dissolve BPW, and then the townships would enter into their own contractual relationship to become an authority. So it's not as if we're overriding some decision. We would be making, this board would be making the decision to scrap the BPW again.
Sonny?
Well, and not that this can of worms doesn't get more complicated, but you also have to remember that we have a number of Grand Traverse County employees assigned to the Department of Public Works that are under contract to the Board of Public Works to operate the facilities. You know, so that's one technical problem. You also have in place a number of intergovernmental contracts between the townships and the Board of Public Works. And those contracts are with the Board of Public Works, not with this board. So if you start talking about an authority for water and sewer, how do you deal with the intergovernmental agreements for resource recovery, for example, that are between the townships and the Board of Public Works? You know, it's not just as simple as saying, okay, water and sewer townships, take your water and sewer and go stand over there in the corner and run your own operation, we're out of it. Because the fact is, we have a county department made up of county employees that are actually doing that work.
I don't think you would be
By contract.
saying to them to go stand in the corner. I don't think that's the intent of anybody. What I'm saying is looking at it, I think there might be some thought that might be a more efficient way to run this system.
And I
you're
don't
right,
I don't disagree at all, because I've talked about an authority for this department for 10 years.
Then you're
But the
visionary.
fact is that I don't believe this board has the ability to direct them to do that. Is that your understanding?
No,
Bob?
the only thing this board could do is get rid of the county board of
Dissolve it,
public
force
works,
them
and
to
then
do it.
it'd be up to them to create their own authority.
But-
Although, because of all of the contractual relationships, the employees, all of these practical things, that just throwing out the BPW without a backup plan doesn't make any sense.
Okay, let's move on to item B, new job classification. And here we go.
Good
morning. My name is Terry Quinn. I'm the Circuit Court Administrator. Court seems to be a big word today. And I had sent in some paperwork, talked to Jen and the HR department, and a little bit to Dennis Aloya about the job classification of a deputy court administrator. We had some miscommunications regarding the level of classification. So what I would like to do today is just to talk to you about the position and see if you have any questions about that. And we would like to table the pay scale today, but just talk about the job classification.
Any questions?
I guess my question is this something that's better handled after Jen does the evaluations of the jobs and assigns point scales to all of the jobs that are being done? Or do we create a new position now and then go to evaluate it again?
Did Jen answer that?
Jen, what I'd ask is, do you recommend that we do this classification, or this, because this is truly a new position as I read it?
Correct, and I think we have someone that's been operating in this capacity. And Terry, correct me if I'm wrong, but we have someone operating in this capacity that has been operating in this capacity, in this role, and so that's why, it would be more relevant to handle it now versus later.
Chris?
But Jen, don't we have other employees that may be doing the same thing, operating in another classification? And shouldn't we handle those now? If we do one, what about all the others? And I share Commissioner Wheelock's concern on that.
Mhm. And we've had a few. I mean, we've had, I think it all depends on where the funding's coming from and different things. We've had the planner come across that was handled through some external sources, but we got a lot of questions on that with that $1 million grant and how that was going to be taken care of. So we've had that planner position. We had the office clerk position in Register of Deeds, where the chief deputy, or the the deputy left, replace it with the office clerk. So I think we've been doing some of these for some of the
No, I
departments.
think, Jen,
That's-
the question
no.
is, I'm sorry, Commissioner.
Now, as I understand it, that's not what happened in the Register of Deeds office. What happened in the Register of Deeds office is Peggy Haynes said that she would take on additional responsibilities.
Right.
So that position could be eliminated, saving the county money, and she would, to make up for the clerical work, she would add a clerical worker. So that's not the same thing.
I think,
And I don't necessarily disagree with you. I think the employees, though, are seeing some changes being done in other places. I was just more or less making you aware that some employees are seeing some of these other changes, not necessarily knowing all the details surrounding them, like the planner position that wasn't coming from the general fund, those types of things. I think some other things have been done with jobs, just should be aware of, that have come across to the board in different areas, is more or less kind of what I was trying to say. I don't know. Do you have something to add, Dennis, on that?
no.
So do you
So is your-
anticipate adding additional personnel if this classification goes through?
No, we would eliminate a circuit court specialist position and replace it with the deputy court administrator position.
Ross?
Yeah, so, I mean, looking at, what was in the packet, it's all based on, rating the position basically for pay grade. So what you're saying is if we table that part, you just want us to create a title that says deputy court administrator, and we'll figure out later how much will be paid?
Right. We had a deputy court administrator, but it's been probably 12 or more years since we've had someone in that position. And Jen and I had been communicating back and forth, and we did have a miscommunication regarding the level. So we would like to have an opportunity to discuss that, so we can be in agreement when we appear before you.
Is this position in your 2011 budget that has been submitted?
It is,
And your budget has the recommended cuts in it?
yes.
Have you submitted your budget for 2011?
No, Judge Power is working with Dean on that.
Oh,
But
okay.
we have met our goal.
Cool.
Your goal.
Good.
I'll make a motion to approve the new job classification as presented, without the compensation issue.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and support. Any further discussion?
No, I just want to be clear, there's a disagreement as to what the level of compensation should be. All right.
Yeah, without the compensation issue.
Oh, without the compensation issue.
right.
Okay.
Chris?
Well, please don't take this personally, but I did not support the planner position either. I think that what we have to do is a complete review and of all the county positions. And at this time in our budget process, I don't believe creating a new position, and that's, as I read it, is what we should be doing at this time. So I will be voting no.
How long has the person been doing the function of deputy court administrator?
This employee has been with us for 15 years and has been really doing this position for probably 2 years. We discussed it with Human Resources at the end of last year, and we were, like a lot of other people, waiting for the Siegel study to see what the outcome would be. So, we made the decision that there was no decision regarding Siegel, and so that's why we tabled it as long as we did.
Sonny?
Isn't the,
Sorry.
excuse me, isn't the court's workload been reduced, though, by the economic conditions?
No.
Circuit court stats are up?
I might have those with me.
Yeah, it's in this report. No, it's just report.
Grand Traverse County's share has increased by 2%. It was 72%, and the figure we're using for 2011 is 74%. Let's see. I don't think that I have my 2009 stats, but the total caseload was 2,584 cases. 74% of that is for Grand Traverse County, 17% is Antrim County, and 9% is Leelanau County. And that, if memory serves me correct, that was an increase in our total caseload.
This deputy administrator, though, court administrator, would serve all 3 counties, correct?
As I do, yes.
Okay.
Okay, we have
I have a question.
Beth has a question?
Yeah. There was a deputy court administrator position that's been vacant, right?
Correct.
And so,
Well, no, I don't think that's true.
that's what I'm reading.
There used to be a deputy court administrator,
Yes,
but that was not, you haven't had one for years.
yes.
And they requested it in the 2010 budget, but we didn't include it as a recommendation in the 2000. You didn't approve it as a 2010 position, and so now they're coming back for it to be reinstated.
Okay, so there was okay.
There has not been a deputy court administrator since I've been here, in 9 years. But before that, there was regularly a deputy court administrator, I
Right.
think.
And it was asked for in the 2010 budget,
That's
and you didn't
correct.
recommend that,
That's
and
right.
we did not implement it.
That's right.
So what is your recommendation on this agenda item?
Well, I want to see this, I want to see I'm hoping that the two can get together on what the classification should be. I have not looked over, because I knew there was still this disagreement, I haven't looked over whether this is how necessary the position is. If Jen says it's necessary and the court feels it's necessary, I won't have a problem with that. But I haven't seen the 2011 budget, so I can't even tell how, financially it fits in. I'm assuming, though, that Terry's got it worked into the budget in terms of financially taking care of it. One thing that I was not aware of until the last year or so was that Terry has taken on additional duties, and I don't want to speak for them. Is it mediation you do, Terry, or when you meet with the...
I'm an SCAO-approved mediator, which really is outside the realm of what I do for the court. I mediate outside the court in a different district, but I do settlement conferences.
That's what I meant. She's doing settlement conferences in the circuit court system here that I don't think was done very often with the previous administrator.
Correct.
So that's additional, that's a duty she's taken on, so she travels into the different courts and mediates these settlements. And so that's one of the reasons I believe that you were looking for a deputy to do more of the administrative stuff.
Well, and a big portion of what I do, too, is reporting to the state. We don't, just report to the counties. We have a lot of reporting that we do for the State Court Administrative Office. We do statistics for Grand Traverse, Antrim, and Leelanau County, and that includes all the family divisions. So it's quite a huge caseload.
Yes, my recommendation, I guess my recommendation would be not to take any action on this until they've ironed out the pay scale, and then do it all at one time, hopefully next month.
Sonny?
Well, this is, I understand Terry's description this morning, this is not a new job, this is just a new job classification. A few years ago, we had a committee called the Classification Committee, which I had the pleasure of sitting on for a couple of years. And what I seen continuously in that group was current county employees had come to the top of their pay grade and they wanted more money. So what they did is they came in and they asked to have their classification changed. And, unlike the planner position where we were actually hiring an additional person to do functions that were being paid for with the grant, this is truly nothing more than the person that's in this job wants more money. And I won't support this until we've done the evaluations of all of the jobs and decide how it goes.
Hey, Mike?
Terry, how much of a hardship on your office would it be to wait on this, similar to Sonny's request?
That's a question that, how do I tell the employee that they're not going to be compensated for the work that they've been doing? And it's something that, we've been talking about since last year.
Is it different work than they were doing 6 months ago?
She's been doing it for more than 6 months.
Well,
Another question, Terry, is this one of those employees that was getting the stipend?
Yes,
So the stipend would go away?
correct.
So that's another thing. We had 2 employees over there that were getting a stipend that historically started back about in 2004. The judges eliminated the court administrator position for 2 years, and we put a stipend on for 2 employees to pick up some of the extra workload. So there was no court administrator for 2 years, and then Terry was hired. And at that time, my assumption and understanding was that the stipend would go away. The judges said that they felt the work was still being done at the same level, and so the stipend is still there. And so this would eliminate one of those stipends, which I'm very much in favor of. So that is a good, positive thing. I have to tell you, I can't give you a recommendation. I'm not in favor of this idea of back paying it to January 1st, the way the judges are requesting it. And I think this is, Commissioner Maxbauer, I don't know if this is what you were kind of getting at, but the question becomes, all those other employees that have, and I'll use the example of Commissioner Agee.
That is exactly what I was getting at,
that have
Dennis.
said for 3 years, since Siegel, we're not being paid for what we're doing, and we've been doing it for 3 years. And I think this is maybe what you're getting at too, and now we're going to say, but we're going to pay this person for what they're doing, and we're not going to pay those other ones. That's, I think, the bigger issue.
We're going to make an exception, and that's my argument.
There's another factor too, that my administrative staff consists of 6 employees that supervise, friend of the court, so on. We have a position that became vacant in February, and in order to, another budget constraint, we have not filled that position. So we have been short 1 person, full-time. We have 2 people out on disability, and I have this person that we're looking for the deputy position that has been, and you talk about good employees as opposed to bad employees. I have 2 employees that they can carry the workload of the entire staff if, working through their lunch and we don't ask them to do that. But they are excellent employees, and I hate to lose them to another company because they're not going to be paid. I can do without that extra staff person, but I need to keep my 2 key people.
So you have 3 people off right now, Terry?
Yeah. Yeah. I work a lot of hours.
Question, when they say there's no compensation for the duties that this person's doing above and beyond our deputy court administrator, then that's not necessarily true if they have the stipend, correct?
Well, I'm assuming that what they're saying is that the stipend, they took on some additional duties than what their regular job was to compensate for the stipend. But now they're saying there's additional duties that they're taking on that were previously Terry's, in addition to the amount that was allocated to pay for the stipend, or paid by a stipend.
As far as changing the staffing plan amendment and, somebody working outside the scope of what their duties are, did this commission, and I was on vacation, so let me ask you, did we not change to a deputy planner position?
Yes.
Which would have been very similar, correct?
Yes.
Did the board vote to do that?
Yeah, and it's a technicality, it's just wording, but in that case, what you did is you reorganized a whole department and reevaluated the whole department and changed the jobs accordingly. You also changed an office specialist to a planning technician. So it's kind of the same, but it's different in that it was a staff reorganization of the whole department.
And there was a $1
Because my
million
inclination is
grant
not
to
to support
administer.
it, but on the other hand, if that's what the practice of this board has been,
Yeah, the board has done it a couple of times in reorganizations.
Well, and the planning department was done to manage a $1 million grant that we got.
Okay, we have a motion, Ross?
Based on what I'm hearing, I think, including from our administrator, I really think we need to, and I would make this motion, we should table this until we get the whole, compensation and everything figured out in one package. I mean, I know it's already been tabled for a month, and I know that's not what you're looking for, but I don't think it means much to approve the deputy court administrator until we figure out what how the pay is going to work.
doesn't a motion to table supersede anything?
It does.
Motion to table for 1 month.
No, I
He just did that.
Oh, you got a second.
Okay, motion by Richardson.
Sorry, I
we have a motion by Rich and support by
Actually, I
Fred.
didn't say 1 month though, Beth. What I said was until
Table?
the compensation item can be presented in such a way. If you can do it quicker than a month, that's fine.
We have a motion to table. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, the same?
All right.
Thank you.
Sorry. Okay. Now we'll move on to septic treatment facility.
Well, that was just on there. We're keeping it on there so it stays at the forefront of your minds, not that it isn't any.
right,
There's
then,
really nothing new to report.
We go on to new business?
No.
Chris?
I have a question for Dennis on this, It's in relation to this. Have we received the payment that we requested, the $52,000 yet?
Not the last time I checked, which was about a week ago.
Didn't have the money. Okay, new business? Dick?
No,
Oh, just,
I just was gonna suggest maybe we put little coin receivers on everybody's toilet.
okay. Budget discussion.
Really, I have nothing to add. I took care of most of it during the
Okay, we
update.
have a second public comment. Doesn't seem like anybody's here. Any members of the board wish to?
I would like to mention something that went on the other night at Green Lake. We have a group of veterans that want to go out onto the airport and build an arch as a memorial to all veterans of all wars. They want to build an arch that's going to be higher than the arch in St. Louis. The same thing.
The planes fly underneath it?
Well, that's going to be a problem.
Do they know how tall that arch is?
They're talking over 600 feet.
Yeah, it's just about 650 feet.
And they want a 600-car parking lot.
Good luck.
And big plans, but I just thought I'd pass them on to you. We'll probably have an airport disappear because you can't have an arch in an airport boat.
I was gonna say, well, anyway.
But that's their plans.
All right, committee reports?
I would mention that some of us were at the ribbon cutting ceremony yesterday morning for the Keystone Road reconstruction. It is open, and it's a very impressive
Cool.
construction
Very, very
project. So you get a
beautiful,
chance to take Keystone Human, it's a nice improvement.
I must say, I was traveling south down Keystone, and I saw the trellis overpass, and it looked like castle fortifications. So cool looking, kind of.
Old Dickie the ribbon cutter.
Yeah. Okay. Any other committee reports? Larry?
Reference Blair's vote on the solid waste. I believe the main reason that failed, and I don't think it's going to pass in any of the rural townships where any form of government's involved and they put the fee on the tax rolls. Because the comments I heard consistently out there were, once it's there, that fee will go up, it's on my taxes, I don't have a choice. And so that's why they voted no, they had the choice, because if they want to discontinue their garbage, they just quit paying their bill and the garbage guy don't come anymore. But that's the main reason. Even though the savings was there, the overriding factor was the distrust of taxation on the tax bill.
Imagine that.
Well, and the other thing is, a lot of people don't have any pickup.
Right.
Nor they're going
That's
to get
true, too.
charged for it, so.
Yeah.
Okay, anything else? Notices and announcements? And/or, Chris?
I just want to let everybody know, and Dennis, if you would let your staff know, my computer was attacked by the mother of all viruses, and I took it to Staples on Sunday, and they said, oh, we'll have it back to you by Monday. And I think that's why I emailed you twice and said I can't find my link to my county email. I can access nothing right now. So if anybody is trying to reach me via email, that's why you haven't gotten me. Staples told me they'd have my PC back on Monday, and here it is Wednesday, and it's still not back, and that's a little troublesome for me. But Dennis, if there are any meeting notices, if I could get a telephone call at this particular time until I get my computer back, thank you.
I got one of those neat little devices you just talk on.
That's what I'm reverting to as a telephone.
I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
Think about it.
Okay.
Go, Mike.